Good evening and welcome to the March 2nd, 2010 Planning Commission meeting. Aaron, roll call please.
Commissioner Samut.
Here.
Vice Chair Petersen.
Here.
Chair Chase.
Here.
Commissioner Mishra.
Here.
Commissioner Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Marshall should be on his way, and Commissioner Biasotti called and he will not be here tonight.
Thank you. Commissioner Mishra, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Since we have approval of minutes, of which there are none for this meeting anyway, we'll go through that part. Communications. Aaron, do we have any communications?
Just the usual that you could go to the people at home, if they happen to be watching this, could go to www.SanBruno.CaGov, and in the community development section, you could not only find, you could find the staff report that we have tonight for the housing element as well as the agenda, but you could also find the draft housing element itself. So it's a large document. You could and see it all there in PDF format and want to take a look. And if you have any questions, you could also always call the Community Development Department and Mark Sullivan with specific questions.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, and next item would be public comment on items not on the agenda, and there unfortunately is no public in attendance here this evening, so we will open and close that part of it. Does anybody have a conflict of interest in regards to this? I would think not. Okay, thank you. All right, so next item on the agenda is going to be the only item on the agenda, which is the housing element. We are to consider adoption of a resolution recommending that the City Council approve the San Bruno 2009-2014 housing element of the general plan, dated February 2010, and adoption of a resolution recommending that the City Council adopt a negative declaration for the San Bruno 2009-2014 housing element. And that is it. Staff report or Mark?
I'm going to let Mark Sullivan take this one. He's been the project manager for this project.
Absolutely.
Okay. Good evening, Honorable Chair, Planning Commissioners. As you mentioned, we're here tonight to review the housing element update, and I'm going to briefly go through the process that we've been through over the last year, almost year and a half, in preparing the housing element and getting it through the State Housing and Community Development Department for review and various revisions that we made in response to their comments. Staff and Diet and Bhatia, who's the city's consultant, have been working on this housing element, as I mentioned, for the past year or so. And as you know, the housing element is one of 7 required elements of the general plan, and it must be updated and certified by the State Department of Housing and Community Development once every 5 years. San Bruno's last housing element was adopted in 2003, and the state granted an extension for this housing element. So all cities in the Bay Area are on the same cycle. They're all doing the same process as we are. The city has prepared a negative declaration for the environmental review of the housing element update. Since the housing element is consistent with the recently adopted general plan update and its environmental impact report, no significant impacts associated with this update were identified. The city has the appropriate zoning for the properties listed on the housing sites inventory, which is in Chapter 4, to meet the city's regional fair share of housing allocation of 973 units between 2007 and 2014. Therefore, staff concluded that an initial study and negative declaration would be the appropriate level of environmental review, and this is typical of housing element updates. The negative declaration was circulated for a 30-day public comment period that ended on February 21st, 2010. There were no public comments, and there were two agencies provided comments. One was from CCAG, acting as the Airport Land Use Commission, which determined that the housing element, like the general plan, is in compliance with the San Mateo County Comprehensive Airport Land Use Plan for the San Francisco Airport area. The draft housing element was submitted to HCD, which I'll use that for Housing and Community, the State Department of Housing and Community Development, for required review last September, and HCD provided their comments in a letter in November. Staff addressed all of HCD's comments, and after receiving input from the City Council, submitted a second draft housing element to HCD in January. HCD's November comment letter requested a number of revisions in order for the housing element to comply with state law. Most of the comments were in two areas. One related to the analysis of sites suitable for residential development, and the second related to planning for homeless shelters. On the first matter regarding the analysis of residential sites, the housing element must include an inventory of residential sites to determine if there are adequate sites to meet the city's share of regional housing needs. The inventory must identify in great detail enough residentially zoned land at appropriate densities to accommodate the housing need at various income levels. HCD was concerned that the city would need to rezone sites in order to meet its regional fair share. However, staff was able to show that there is sufficient land currently zoned residential or downtown mixed use to meet the city's regional fair share. The revisions to text and tables in Chapter 4 clarify the city's progress and plan to meet its fair share of regional housing needs. Essentially, we have currently approximately, well, actually over 700 units of housing that are either under construction or approved, which qualify for the 2007 to 2014 period. So there are really about 250 other sites that were identified, which are either residentially zoned or downtown, or zoned downtown, which could accommodate those 250 housing units. The other issue that HCD was concerned about regards homeless shelters. And one of the most significant issues that the housing element addresses is compliance with SB 2, the recent state law which requires cities to establish a zoning district where homeless shelters are allowed by right, without requirement for a conditional use permit. San Bruno has an identified need for 32 homeless shelter beds. Program 6D in the housing element identified the general plan transit-oriented development area as the appropriate zone within which to locate homeless shelters because of its access to public transportation and services. However, HCD was concerned that the 10-bed or less limit on the size of an individual facility, which was included in that housing element program, would be a constraint on the development of homeless shelters. Staff consulted with homeless shelter providers, and indeed a 10-bed homeless shelter would be almost impossible to build because it would just simply wouldn't be financially feasible and it wouldn't be economical to run. The program was revised to remove the 10-bed limit with the support of the City Council. The element also states that the city will consult with homeless service providers to develop appropriate and reasonable standards for homeless shelters as part of the zoning code update. So that process will occur during the zoning code update, and you will also be involved in that. Finally, in a phone conversation in January, HCD requested the city to add information in Program 2B, which addresses the city's efforts to prepare the transit corridors plan. HCD recommended describing the process to change Ordinance 1284 to increase building height limits. HCD felt this was necessary because redevelopment of the transit corridors into mixed-use areas with residential uses consistent with the recently adopted San Bruno General Plan is a major initiative in the current housing element. A section was added to that program, Program 2B, explaining that if the transit corridors plan is approved and if it includes a recommendation to increase height limits, the city would need to bring the plan before the voters as a ballot measure in order to be approved. HCD has since provided a letter dated February 16th, stating that the housing element meets all of the statutory requirements and that San Bruno will be in compliance with state law once the element is adopted and submitted to HCD. This item is scheduled to be considered by the City Council on March 23rd. And that concludes my presentation, and Aaron and I are here to answer any questions you may have about the housing element.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, anybody have any questions, comments to Mark or to Aaron in regards to this? Other than the fact that it's a very detailed document, and I didn't quite get through it all, but it's a great job, seriously. So.
And through the chair. A couple points I'd like to make is, first, dealing with the state, sometimes a tedious issue, as you know, the state really does have, they have goals for all cities to meet their housing inventory, to make sure that they meet their housing goals for overall state from a regional basis and by city basis. And actually, they were pretty, this time around, it was a pretty easy process where we went back and forth, but Mark did do a really good job with them responding to their comments. And what was interesting talking to them is, how much they focused on Ordinance 1284 that we have that limits the heights of building, and they basically see that as right now as our biggest impediment to actually producing housing within San Bruno, and actually having new development within San Bruno, whether it be mixed use in our transit corridor. So I think that shows that we are on the right track right now by doing the transit corridor plan and setting up something that eventually that where we might be able to exceed that 3-story height limit if the plan is approved and if the voters decide that's something that we want to do. But I think the state is in line with us right now, saying, hey, that is something that you have to at least look at, because that is your biggest impediment right now to producing housing.
Great. Thank you.
Through the chair?
Yes, Commissioner.
I know that it's totally related to this, Mark, but I recently had the opportunity of having some discussion around homeless people, and I learned some new things, and I don't know if you have any input to this or any impact to the element, but my understanding is that there are a variety of different reasons why people are homeless, but one that's really becoming quite prevalent are those that have been incarcerated and are being released, and they have restrictions around them, and part of that is that they can't be within, certain penal codes require certain restrictions, and they can't be within 2,000 feet of a park or other types of environments.
Mm-hmm.
And so what was interesting to me is to hear the feedback as to some of those that have been released, that they have certain places they can sleep only, and they're designated places, and it's become a big issue because they're not able to go in certain areas. They have to move around every 2 hours. They have to have docking stations where to dock in for their GPS component. And there is the whole other issue about how do they make it in life, but really the piece that I'm speaking to is, has there been any discussion or input or need or feedback, or from your point of view, have you, has that been something that's been brought up?
Well, in our discussions, no, it hasn't. We've met with homeless providers, and somebody from Adrian Tissier's office, and we've talked about homeless shelter in general, and we've communicated also with St. Bruno's Church that runs a small shelter there, and they're actually interested in potentially doing something a little bit more. And so, no, we haven't gotten down to that specific level, but I think that would be, if that were your desire, something that we would address.
Well, the issue that encounters is they're not even eligible to be in homeless shelters,
Right.
the particular penal codes.
Right.
There's a variety
Yeah,
of them,
yeah,
and
that's
this is one of
real.
them. And so I just find I was actually quite astounded by the impact of what it takes to survive, and just, how does a person survive, and then how do we keep people safe from those that have, it's almost as if it's a no-win situation.
Right.
And so it gave thought to our communities, that people who are on bikes, people who have backpacks, they're on the road. And so part of that is, it was interesting to me, has there been any impact to San Bruno looking at those situations? They sit at park benches, not park benches, I have to use a different language, but at bus stops a lot. They're able to go to, they have as part of their rehabilitation, going to centers during the daytime, is they actually have circles around places where they can go. But we are now requiring, from a planning commission point of view, housing units to have mini parks and other things that are family friendly. And so should that happen, it's not friendly to those that are trying to rehabilitate. You know, it's just it really provoked a lot of thinking on my end, and trying to think about this from a point of community and having environments that, not having a mindset of, well, they've done their crime, do their time, that's too bad. But the reality is, they do get released, and whose job is it? And from my perspective, it's all of our jobs to think well about our communities. And so I just raised a tremendous amount of questions in my mind about, wow, this is a whole nother unspoken piece of situations that are ongoing, that are not visible. They're practically invisible. They're not transparent at all. And so I've worked late these last few weeks, quite late in my office, and then leaving 11:30 to 2:30 in the morning, I'm actually seeing a level of activity, and it's not necessarily what looks like drug scenes or substance, I should say, of any sort. It really looks like people are trying to figure out what to do. I see them, as in bus stops and families, children. I mean, it was really, now that my eyes are open to it, it allows me to sort of look at it from a different perspective and wonder, as I'm driving in our own community, is that part of something that's taking place that we don't know about? And maybe the police department might know some components. I don't know, but I couldn't help but think about that as we're looking at the housing element. And as I was looking this back in my office, I didn't read every single word detail for detail, obviously, but it certainly raised for me that level of thinking about our communities, and we'd like to save the world, but the reality is, we have to start one person at a time. And so anyway, that was my interest in sort of getting your feedback or your input. Had you had any experience or any input or any awareness of these situations?
Yeah, I think Mark answered part of it. I think what we do have to do, and what we say we're going to do, and what we will do as part of this, is that we actually are going to meet with homeless advocates and people who actually provide homeless shelters, so that we could see, how can we best set ourselves up so that it will be successful within our zoning code amendments. So as we're doing this comprehensive zoning code, that's how we're actually going to implement the housing element policy. So you will get a chance to see it at that point, and things like radiuses, things like exactly where they're going to be sited will come up during that point. But in the meantime, what we're going to do as staff is actually talk to people who produce homeless housing to get the best possible input to give to you.
Okay, I'd love to be informed about those pieces. I feel an interest in looking at what that looks like, and because in my line of business, I have had families who've been homeless and have lived in cars, and I just didn't realize the levels of complexity around some of these. You think of homeless not having a place, but it's actually driven by other things that are beyond their control, and those that are trying to figure out to be successful have limitations. And so I'm interested just to see, to be more informed and educated around that, just because of my involvement in community and family. It's really important to me. So I'd appreciate being informed as those come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. That was some good points. Anybody else have any questions or concerns about this? I don't see any, so Aaron, I think we should move on to, I guess we need to have a motion.
You set the motion to set the, and after you get a motion in a second, I'll do a roll call.
Do a public comment?
Well, you know what, Commissioner Mishra, that's a good point. I guess I actually should open it up to the public. Public comment, seeing there is none, I will open it and close it. How's that? Robert's Rules of Order. Okay. So, we need to get a motion.
And just to remind that the first motion is for the negative declaration resolution.
Through the chair, I'll attempt
Mr.
it.
Johnson.
I move that the Planning Commission adopt a recommendation to move forward to the City Council for the approval of the San Bruno 2009, or I should say 2009 and 2014 housing element of a general plan dated February 2010, and adopt resolution recommending that the City Council adopt a negative declaration for the San Bruno 2009-2014 housing element.
Second.
That's a second. Okay, there is a motion and a second on the floor. Roll call.
All right. Commissioner Smoot?
Aye.
Commissioner Marshall?
Aye.
Vice Chair Petersen?
Aye.
Chair Chase?
Aye.
Commissioner Mishra?
Aye.
And Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. That's pretty much it.
So there's one more reso.
Oh, did I miss that?
Isn't there? There's two. Yes, there's one for the, what you have to do is you split them up. The environmental review is one resolution, and then the housing element itself is the second resolution.
Okay, sorry about that.
One is attachment D,
Through the chair.
and then there's E.
Commissioner Petersen.
I move
Did I
that
miss
that the commission adopt a resolution recommending that the city council approve the San Bruno 2009 to 2014 housing element of the general plan.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Commissioner Smoot.
Aye.
Commissioner Marshall.
Aye.
Vice Chair Petersen.
Aye.
Chair Chase.
Aye.
Commissioner Mishra.
Aye.
And Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0.
Very good. All right, there's, well, we have room for discussion and time. Does anyone want to discuss anything? Aaron?
I have some staff. Good news, we received an application for treetops, the official application. This one, they're basically proposing two things in this. They're proposing, A, to keep their larger project alive, the 510 unit project to be to continue on. They wanted an additional 12-month extension. But the primary portion of their application now is to remodel the existing 308 units. And it looks like they do have their financing together to remodel the existing 308 units. And what they're proposing to do is keep the two projects alive on a similar track. And once they pull a building permit for one of the two, the other project would no longer be valid. But they're on a pretty fast track right now because of where their financing will be working. So we need to have a second architectural review meeting in March, which is March 25th. So I need 3 volunteers for the Treetops architectural review meeting. Commissioner Chase, Mishra, and I saw Petersen and Marshall. Okay. Petersen had his hand up first, so I'll go with him, and Marshall could be back up.
What are the dates on that?
Actually,
Okay.
Commissioner Marshall, would you like to take my spot? That'd be okay. You were first. No, it's okay. I'll give it to you, Bob.
Okay, we'll have,
Either
Marshall's
way.
the new leader there. All right.
I'm good with it.
And it's March 25th. And we'll most likely have it, the Planning Commission in April, followed by the City Council in May, if they have all their application materials in line and if they have put forward an application that we can recommend approval for.
All
And if
right.
anyone from the public's watching now, we will be sending out a neighborhood courtesy notice within the next week. And the plans you could also find on the community development website. You can find it in the community development section. You want to go directly there. It's sanbruno.ca.gov/developments.html. And all the new plans are there. So that's it.
That's good.
Through the chair.
Commissioner Petersen.
When, as this matter goes through the commission and possibly the council and the staff, I caution you to keep a very sharp eye on that quality of the development because that area is subject to salty air and it's sat unprotected in many respects for quite a while. I'm just concerned as to how possible it is to remodel that at this point.
Yeah, I would say remodel is it's practically going to be a new building. What our building official has met up there, as well as our structural engineers have met up on site quite a few times with them to go over what they would be intending to do. They'd basically take out almost everything. All exterior materials would be removed. All the drywall would be removed inside, so they'd strip it down to the studs and then rebuild from there. And if us as a building department were out there, they're having to meet current building codes, so they're having to upgrade some things that are out there. If we see a post that's been degraded because of weather, they're going to have to replace it. So we're going to have you're exactly correct. Things have been exposed to the elements, so there are things that we're going to have special inspectors up there at all times, making sure as they're installing things that the components that are existing are strong enough to install against.
And in that process, would you have a structural engineer review that in the field to evaluate its existing condition?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Good point, because I know I drive by there every day and it gets worse and worse looking every day.
Yep.
All right, well, any other discussion from any other commissioners here? Nope. All right, well, seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you.